Okay, it's Saturday, June 29th, 2024, 6:25 p.m. I'm back in my office. I've just had, I don't know, it's been an interesting afternoon. I'm by myself. I cleaned the bathroom. That took a while. And I talked to Christopher, ate some pizza, and I watched 2 hours worth of video on YouTube about a guy talking about OriginalSin, and he pretty much, it's 10 years old, and he pretty much stated my whole case. So it actually validated, I think, for me anyway, that my thoughts on this line are in place. I listened to the guy talk about ADHD, and I turned my phone to gray mode, but then I just sat and I probably spent about at least an hour, maybe an hour and a half, just scrolling YouTube shorts, and I saved a bunch of those. A couple of the things that I thought were really interesting were these animal rescue ones. A moose stopped a car with a couple of calves, and we were trying to rescue another one. I thought it was interesting that the moose had a couple of calves. I don't know how many, if these things are fake or whatever, but it was really, really interesting because the point is that it's showing these wild animals. Another one was a whale shark that saved a turtle, and I think it was a whale shark, and pushed this sea turtle up to a boat, and the boat was able to untangle the sea turtle. And another one where, it was the same one. So it saved the sea turtle, but then the thing hung around for a while. And no, that was a different one. Different one was there was a swimmer out there, and the shark was close to it, and he thought it was going to be attacked, but he didn't. And then the thing just kept staying near the boat. So a guy went in to check it out and saw that this thing needed to be rescued. It had a big rope around it also. So, and those were 3 different videos. And the point they're saying is these wild animals have a sense that humans can help them. Now, my thinking is that that's probably genuine. I don't know that they're necessarily making that up, or that they're doing these videos to the thought that they would just be staging these things. These aren't AI created things. They seem to be real, but it makes sense. It makes simple sense, and I think that's part of the thing I want to communicate to people, is these things make simple sense when you understand how our brains work. And our brains have this, this conscious dimension, and I think that animals do too. I think we have the ability to communicate with animals, and I want to find the research and find that I think it was a 60 Minutes program that I saw decades ago, but I just thought it was fascinating because it was a documentary on the Queen's dogs in England at the time, and how that the staff would alter their schedule based on the dog's behavior. So the dog would go through a certain mode. He'd basically get into this place where he's waiting for the Queen to come home. So many hours or a day or whatever, they would note the behavior of the dog, and they would know, regardless of her schedule, the information that they had or whatever, they would adjust their schedule based on the dog. And they actually showed they had some other they did some testing with this woman. It was a different case. I don't remember the details of the setup, but it was a similar thing where this woman's dog would do a certain thing when she was coming home. So they did a test, and she went out with somebody, and they videotaped the whole thing. She didn't know where they were going or when they were coming home. But at some point on the journey, they stopped at a certain place and they said, okay, we're going home now. And so when she knew they were going home now, they went back and there's if I remember this right, sometime shortly after that, the dogs alerted and they knew she was coming home. Now, that kind of information, that kind of anecdotal information is worthy of investigation. Or it's worthy of consideration in the bigger picture. So maybe those types of things, when they're tested out, maybe it's 50-50. Maybe it works sometime, maybe it doesn't work the other time. So there's no telling thing there. Maybe that's just a one-off. But see, here's the thing: even if it is just a one-off, it happened. If you can prove that it happened, there's some causal connection there, not just correlation. There's a causal connection. There's something that says, there's something that's communicating there between the owner and the dog. There's some form of entanglement that's in place, and I put that word entanglement in quotes because who knows? That's the quantum word to describe these kind of types of things. But there is a connection. Maybe that's another simpler way to put that. There's a connection, and Christians, anybody, it doesn't have to be Christians or people of faith. People feel this connection with their kids. I remember waking up in the middle of the night. I didn't hear anything. I just woke up and the light was on, and I went into the basement, and there I found Sean had the weights down around his neck. He was lifting weights and he got stuck, and he was under the weights at that point, and I got him out. There are so many cases of this type of communication between humans that it's and I know, for example, that this has probably been studied at length or to some degree with the things like remote viewing and these other aspects of this dimension of human psychology and psychokinetic activity, if that's a word, that I'm sure there's investigation and that there's more evidence-based research, we'll call it science, that has been done on that, but that has been withheld because of the sensitive nature of it, and because there's power in that information. There's knowledge. There's power because it has the ability to influence and communicate, and it augments, it adds value to our human abilities, which makes leaders and others who want to maintain control, they don't want people to have that information, but that's out there, and that's valid, and that's not conspiracy theory stuff. These are anecdotes. I'm not making any generalization. I'm saying this person said that happened, and this reporter looked at this and said those things happened. That's a data point. Now, it's not a hallucination, it's a data point. Now, how you interpret that data point and what you do with it is really, I think, what needs to be investigated, because these data points are all over the place in this realm, and they're ignored. These data points are ignored, or they're not ignored, but they're investigated behind closed doors, and the information is being withheld. So that's actually a control mechanism. That's I want to say that's a manifestation of evil, in the sense that it's the attempt to gain leverage and control over other humans. And so I think about these things all the time. I can't stop thinking about them. That's why this afternoon I'm going through this, and I have this list of things I want to do, and these things I want to do that I think are on my agenda, and I have my little wanted to agentify myself and have these little roles, and I made out my list, but then I am compelled down this path of investigation. I say compelled. That would sound like that's an external type thing, but this is more of an internal thing. This is my wiring. This is me. This is who I am. And this is my heart, and I'm seeking understanding, and I feel like this is what I'm supposed to be doing right now. Now, it does get a little disconcerting when I think about this. I feel like I'm literally climbing the rock wall, the free climbing a huge sheet, flat rock, and I just got to go from handhold to toe hold to handhold to grip to whatever they call the things, and I'm just climbing. And when I'm doing this, I feel like I'm finding a path. I'm finding these things, things that connect. For example, listening to this pastor from 10 years. He's retired now and has a channel, and it's interesting when I listen to these guys, because they're very close. This guy probably describes my understanding of original sin as simple and as best as anyone I've ever heard. He went through the Adam and Eve scenario, and he said they have two things. They have free will, and they were ignorant. And I think that really is spot on. That's what happened. But I think there's more to it. When you look at the story, they were ignorant, but I think there's another piece, and that is they were innocent, and they were, because they were ignorant of, and what they were specifically ignorant of, in addition to just life, because they, this pastor said it was on the 10th day, but who knows how long they were there, in the garden doing these things, naming all the animals and doing all the stuff that they were supposed to be doing. I don't know that we can say definitively. The Bible doesn't say definitively. That's interpretive. Let's just say they were there for some time, however long they were in the garden. While they were in the garden, we know that they were created as they were good, and this pastor said that very emphatically. I like that. It was very simple. Adam wasn't created with a sinful nature. He was created with a free will, and he was ignorant. And and he was told that the one thing he wasn't supposed to do was eat from the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. Now, this is what I've said before. The only thing he didn't have knowledge of, experiential knowledge, was evil. See, he was in a good environment by default. He might not have understood that as being good. He just understood that as being his natural environment. And when you're in a natural social environment that's good, this is the thing that I'm not hearing people say, and is that the element, the social element that's there, is trust. You just trust. Children trust. That's why it's so devastating then that we've had to teach our kids not to talk to strangers, because they trust implicitly. They just trust because that's been their experience. Their experience has been nurturing, and their experience has been, for the most part, let's say 30 years ago, before this became, or 40 years ago, or whenever, this became a widespread thing to where it was, we were having thousands and thousands of kids disappearing. They trust. And Adam and Eve didn't know any better. Why would they? How would they be responsible to do that? They weren't, any more than a child who hasn't been warned is going to have any kind of hesitation talking to an elderly man or somebody that looks friendly, that says their mother is sick, they're a friend of the family, and knows his name, knows the parent's name, knows enough of the information. They're going to trust. And not just kids. That's how these serial killers are able to groom and endear themselves to their marks, to their victims, is they are able to engender trust and assume that trust, and they seem and appear trustworthy. That is the piece that I think really needs to be emphasized, because when you do that, it puts in contrast, stark contrast, the clarity of what took place in the Garden of Eden. The clarity meaning that the enemy was there. And I've said this before, the enemy was not their enemy. At that time, he was a member of God's family. God's family was in the garden. The beings, the sons of God, this was his domain. This was a place where these beings also engaged. You cannot infer from the text we have in the Bible of that conversation between the serpent and Eve that was their first conversation. Actually, if you're going to interpret anything from the context, it would be that wasn't their first conversation, that they were conversational. Their conversation had a familiar tone. They didn't exchange greetings. There was nothing like that. And that's exactly what happens when there's grooming involved. There's a greeting, there's an introduction, there's this back and forth in this conversation, and to the point where you're comfortable conversationally, to converse with one another. And then the twist is inserted. Oh, we're having a party tonight. You want to come? You can bring your friends. Blah 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 blah. Yeah, we're gonna watch Star Wars or whatever. You make it attractive and you make it fun. So the enemy was grooming Adam and Eve and played and preyed on their trust and basically lied to them. But that's the interesting part, because I think he took the truth and he twisted it. just enough to get them to do what they weren't supposed to do. Now, Eve knew what she wasn't supposed to do, yet she didn't understand because she trusted the serpent. So she's seeing this as additional information. She has no experiential knowledge of evil. She doesn't have any idea. She's not able to comprehend any danger. She doesn't know what danger is yet in that context. So this is the ignorance that he's talking about. She just simply didn't know. Now, and she's curious. She's human. She's a human woman. So she's curious. She sees it and says, okay, let's try it. Now, then she eats it and she's fine. She didn't die, you know. She's there talking to, and said, here, Adam, try this. This is good. And Adam's like, okay, because he trusted her. Why wouldn't he? Why wouldn't he trust the enemy? Why wouldn't he trust the serpent? There's no reason to assume they wouldn't be trusting everything in the text, the simple text of the story. In that simple story, the simplest answer, the simplest interpretation of that is that they were 100% innocent in that transgression. They were innocent in the transgression. They were not, their heart did not transgress God in any way. That's why this is important, because I think what we get from this is sin is more than just the malevolence of action. It is action. We're going to be held accountable for our actions, for the things that we do in this life. The things that we do, even if we're ignorant, we're going to be held accountable for the things that we do. And that's important. And the moral aspect of that does come into play. And that is evidenced in the conversation between God and Cain. Cain's heart did get hardened. He did have, obviously, malevolent, evil intent, anger manifested against his brother Abel. He was inflamed in his emotion and murdered his brother, basically, because of that, because of his jealousy, because of that, however you want to call that, whatever Jordan Peterson would call that, from a psychological and emotional, his whole mental attitude at that point. So, but God warned them beforehand and told them, to, I don't know the verse, I got to memorize that discourse, but basically said he needed to control that and take care of that. So that took place outside of the Garden of Eden, and that's my point. There was no original sin with Adam and Eve, and there was no seed of sin that took place inside of them. They were innocent from the text, from the simplest, most direct, not reading and inferring anything from what we can assume, but just from the simple circumstances that we look at, the simplest reading of that. And I think that makes it a candidate for the most likely, the most accurate, because it's the simplest. We don't have to infer or add anything to to the case. It goes just based on what we know of the characters in the story, and that's it. And I think of the example that I used with Ed at the atrium at Willow Creek, and this 50-year-old man, 8-year-old boy in a 50-year-old man's body, playing a trick on an 8-year-old boy, or 9 or 10, and, says, "Hey, come over, give me a high five." And he had his hand out there, and that little boy reared back, and he swung with all his might. He said, "Give me a good one." And he reeled back, and then Ed lifted his hand, and the boy smacked the woman right in the butt, right there. And Ed thought that was, and he was mischievous. He was another 8-year-old boy playing a trick on an 8-year-old boy. The problem is that was traumatizing to that young man, because he knew that was wrong. He knew he shouldn't have done that, but he didn't know that until afterwards. See, the result is what he wasn't aware of. I watched the whole thing, and yeah, it was knee-jerk kind of funny. She jumped and said, "Ooh," and it was all like, "Oh, whatever." That poor boy. Now, I'm sure he's okay. I don't know if he thought about it again afterwards, but those are the kind of things that can traumatize people. I know I've been traumatized as a child through the simple consequences of my actions, and through the actions of others, through the actions of my parents. I love my parents. My parents didn't know any better. They weren't trying to hurt me. They were just being people. My dad was kind of like that. My sister was traumatized by my parents, my dad at different times. And you say, well, that's good, that's not good. Well, I don't know that these things need to go through a moral scrutiny, because we survive that. We're built to survive those things. But things that induce trauma are different than the kind of consequence generating actions that we take that cause punishment, or cause parents to have to do a behavior modification or behavior correction. That's necessary. That helps us know right from wrong, good from evil. But it's in the mix-up of these things, when we're traumatized by surprise, when we're hurt, where we're, and worse. And I'm not even going to go into the depth of where this can go, because many people have been severely traumatized at a young age, and they've survived, and they've gone through it. But my point is, that's impactful, and that's the takeaway here. That anything that induces trauma in another human being, trauma is evil. Now, maybe I should talk about what I'm talking about, what trauma is. Trauma is, how do I want to say this? When you're being disciplined, a loving, caring, wise parent will discipline their children, and they may use some form of physical deterrent to do that. Inflicting a level of pain to modify a child's behavior is biblical. That is how we're instructed to do that biblically. Now, that will cause a child to cry. That will cause a child to, cry, to whatever. But it also does impact behavior. It causes and it creates a learning process. Now we're not going to do that again. Or, they try to figure out how to get around it. And there are those kids that will do that. So we have this tremendously volatile, dynamic, many parameters involved in what's happening in this dynamic of our learning process as a human being. And by learning, I mean our experiential reality, what we experience. We learn from the things that we experience. We learn from the things that we experience. And the things that are meant for evil, and when I say meant for evil, when you invoke your will over another human being for your benefit, pleasure, profit, when you exert that will to the detriment of another human being, that's evil. It's that simple. So if you're a boss and you are working your people for wages lower than they should be getting, or whatever, where that's at. That's evil. And that's just a simple example of that. But in a relationship with a controlling person, because you need this person to behave a certain way to soothe you, therefore you are going to manipulate them, you're going to control them. And you do that because you need to do that because you were traumatized as a child. And this is how you have learned to control your world. Okay, so now I'm going to say that's our traditional right now. That's the best understanding we have. And we have some great tools. We have some great mental health professionals working with people, trying to understand the brain, understand the science of trauma, understand the what works, what doesn't work, and the healing aspect of that. It's interesting when you talk about that when it comes to the things like narcissism and narcissistic personality disorder, because there are few cases of people that actually come out of that, but what these psychologists that I listen to say is that is rare. It's really a rare thing because this narcissistic personality disorder, they don't suffer from it. The people around them do. The whole point of this, how to say point, not point, but the essence of this is the ability of these humans, these men, these women, who for some reason feel this absolute need to control and dominate the people around them. Now, some they do it covertly, and some do it overtly. It's these, and that's what makes it so difficult to diagnose sometimes, because the covert ones especially. But at the root, when you get to the motive for why they're doing what they're doing, it's a selfish motive. And that's the evil part. When it is a selfish motive, something that you're doing selfishly because you need that, you want that, you have to have that, and they're supposed to provide that for you. That is a manifestation of evil. And so I said that because I am rehashing some of the stuff that I've talked about before, but I believe that this is where this spiritual dynamic takes place, because we are spirit beings. We are able to be influenced in a spiritual sense. And that's what I want to raise awareness to, is this reality of who we are. Now, this is a billion-dollar business. People talk about this all the time, and they're not Christians, but they're spiritualists, they're New Agers, they're law of attraction people, they're consciousness, whatever. They talk about this, and then people swear by this. And I think it's fascinating because they do that because it works. They follow this pattern, and these things seem to work. They appear to work for them, and I think there's a logical reason for that, and that is because that's part of how we're wired. They're understanding another level of our human existence and our human capacity to interact and influence our environment at this next level. You don't have to be a Christian to do that. You don't have to be a Christian to be a spiritual person. We're all created the same. We all have this same spiritual dynamic. The thing that I think the essence of what I want to talk about and what I want to bring awareness to is the fact that, yes, we are spiritual, and we are subject to these spiritual influences, positive and negative. And I think the reality of this negative spiritual influence is what's being overlooked and missed. And I think it's being overlooked and missed intentionally, that's part of the shadow operation of it. That's part of its hidden agenda, is to stay in the shadows, to stay in the dark. And because what a perfect strategy. If this is what I call intelligent evil is real, if that's working, then the simplest, most effective strategy is to get people to think that the reasons that they do things originate within themselves. There is no external influence. That gives them carte blanche to impact however they want, because it's like being an invisible person that has the ability to impact the physical world. So you're invisible and you walk along and you just punch somebody in the gut, and all of a sudden they feel a gut punch, but they don't know where it came from. That's what this is like. And the way we've explained it so far, and we've looked and we've done all of this investigation, is that we believe that there's something inside of us that's doing that. And what makes this even more of a challenge to work with is that's largely true, because it is inside of us that we make decisions. Our heart, our mind, our us, what is us? But it's inside of us is where our antennas are, and it's where our receptors are. It's where the Wi-Fi receiver is in our spiritual being. So we're able to be influenced in both realms. That's why we have a New Testament. In the New Testament, it talks about the Holy Spirit leading and guiding. How do you think that happens? How does that happen? How does the Holy Spirit communicate to us? Well, if there's a medium, a channel, a wavelength, if there's some functional spiritual communication media, or some way that can be communicated, for good, then it also exists for evil. And I really think that that should be investigated. That should be investigated scientifically. That should be looked into, because I think there are tests, there are measurements, there are scientific method could be applied to understanding how evil manifests. But to do that, you have to you have to make the presumption as part of your hypothesis that there's an external influence, and that's going to be the challenge. So it's this external influence that is the missing variable. But it's been right in front of us. We read about it. We talk about it. See, it's so subtle, but that actually tends to support the case, because that's exactly what you would see. Now, I know that's a little obvious, but when you take a step back and look at the big picture, and take this holistic view of the Bible now, and try to understand what this what the big picture is, we are supposed to walk not after the flesh, but after the Spirit. So we're supposed to shut off that one channel and focus on the Spirit, on the truth. We are to exercise our choice, our wills, to do good and not do evil. To do good, not do bad. To love people, not to hurt people. And to resist the enemy. See, this is more than a metaphor in the Scripture. These are the Scriptures that, which I say Scripture, we have a certain connotation and feeling that comes from these words, but basically these are the reports. These are what the observations were. These are the things that the men and women experienced and wrote at that time that that Jesus had just come. And so what Jesus did is he kind of pulled the cover off, and he started with the casting out of the demons. And I think that's so significant, because I think that is a clue. That's a huge clue for us, and it's a huge clue for end times. Because I think that's what we're supposed to be doing. The only way we're going to be able to make disciples of all nations, teaching them to observe all things whatsoever I've commanded you, is to address this influence of intelligent evil. We have to counter that, and we're not going to be able to counter that if we aren't aware of it, and if we're not able to adequately talk about that, recognize it, observe it. And so here's what we have. What we have is a New Testament. We have these testimonies of the early church right after this took place. So we have this early group of believers, and they're spreading, and they're experiencing tremendous human growth and love and charity and transformation among people, and it's spreading because it makes sense, and the eyewitness testimonies of people seeing Jesus. See, Paul experienced the Lord, but Peter, James, and John, those guys saw Jesus. He was alive. They saw him. They were eyewitnesses. And there were others who were raised from the dead. There were others who knew Lazarus. They were there at the tomb. Then they saw him afterwards. These things are why the message of Christ continued, not just because they made up some stories. Made up stories do not persist like that. Made up stories don't have any weight They don't have any convincing content and the ability to influence people to the degree that the demonstrations of the healing and the power, as Paul would say, and the transformational impact that the message had on people's lives over the decades that followed, that, caused impacts in communities. It caused the idolaters to stop buying the idol worship artifacts. So it had an impact on the economy. And it continued to grow and influence the world. That's why this is so significant. Because, but here's what I'm going to say about that. What we have in these records are the best that these men had to offer from their experience, where they were in time. So here we are 2,000 years later. We have now their testimonies, but we also have 2,000 years of additional experience, additional information, additional anecdotal information, stories, accounts, and so forth. And this is what we need to assimilate also, like the information that we get from the Dead Sea Scrolls and some of these other things where we're able to go and put the information together to give us a better contextual understanding of what the original thoughts were in the minds of the authors and the things that went into the construction of the books of the Old Testament, and then along with the New Testament writers and how they were so rooted in the Old Testament because that's all they had. It makes so much sense. That's all they had. And they weren't replacing that. They were Jews. They respected that, but they saw this as a continuation, as the fulfillment and continuation of God's plan in the world. So they continued that. But here we are today. Now we have, and we're in a new playing field. We've got technology. We have all of this other stuff. And we're not going to be able to recreate the atmosphere that existed in the first few chapters of Acts in the New Testament, because that doesn't exist anymore. But what does exist are humans, are people. What does exist is God, who remains unchanging. And what we have is the Word of God, which the Lord, through His wisdom, mercy, and grace, was able to influence the process along the way for men to write these things down, so that we have that as information, as our source, as our base of information. And now we can take and apply the information that we see today, and we look around today and look for the key to unlock it. And I think the key is right in front of us. It's to do just what it is that Jesus told us to do. And it's really nothing more complicated than that. I think the key to unlocking the whole mystery of the end times, which is a tremendous money maker for Christian writers and on all of the mysteries of the Bible, but the key to end times and understanding end times really has nothing to do with the book of Revelation. The key to unlocking the events that of what will lead up to the return of the Lord is nothing more, nothing less than the end of Matthew 28, is the Great Commission, is doing the thing that we're called to do, and doing it effectively, and using that as the the metric, is using that as the result that we're wanting to accomplish. That returns us back to Paul's mission. That's what brings us back to the what was in the heart of the early church as it was expressed to them by the Lord. And that's different than what we see today. And the reason it's different is because it's been watered down. It has been intentionally diffused and disoriented and perverted and different things, because the enemy is going to do everything he can to work against this process. So, in the final analysis, as we look at this, the reason why it's so important, this distinction of understanding original sin, whether we have it, where that comes from, is if it's internal, if it's a seed, then there's nothing we can do. We just have to sit back and wait for God to do. Then everything is God's to do. If it's not, then it's our responsibility. It's our to do. And so we have the ability to do that. If we didn't, he wouldn't have given it to us. We have the ability to complete the Great Commission. We have, that's our task, that's our responsibility, that's our role, and why wouldn't the Lord be waiting and expecting us to do that? And that's doable. See, he expects us to do it because it's doable. He wouldn't be expecting us to do something that we can't do. The question is, why isn't it happening? Why is it so, why do we feel like we're so, we're like a drunk man running around. We're like somebody who's mentally handicapped, and we don't have all of our faculties. When I think about the body of Christ and the world at large, the prince and power of the air has tremendous influence, and evil is taking place all over the world. But we have the affirmation of Scripture that greater is he that's in us than he that's in the world. So if we want to overcome evil in the world, we overcome it with good. And this is where the analogies, I think, with AI can be really impactful. I'm not going to go into that now because I think I've exhausted my own resource energy and mental energy for this little talk here. But hopefully some of these thoughts, I know they're just repeats of things I've said before, but I want to get used to saying it. I need to put the scriptures together and make it a more crisp and clear and easy to understand. And so yeah, that's all for now. And so Lord, I pray that you'll help me. So that's what I did today. And this is the fruit of that, this little talk I just did. And I'm at peace. I guess I say I'm at peace. I don't know what tomorrow holds. I've applied for all these jobs. I don't know where the money's coming from. I have, just this little thread potential source of income. And I have these things that I'm not doing that are business-wise, but I'm spending all my time thinking and talking about this. So, Lord, you understand what's going on here. I don't. But I'm going to continue, and I just pray for your guidance, for your wisdom, for your leadership. I pray that you will help me to stay on target, and thank you for lifting the cloud that was there last week. Oh my gosh, that was really interesting. I don't really understand all that's going on, but I just want to survive. And if I could, I'd love to see my kids again. Love to see Sean and Amy and the kids. I'd love to be reconciled. I'd love to be in a simple, I don't know that I'm ever going to be in a simple life, but I would love to be a place where I can be around people that care about me and that will let me love them. And I need that. I'm always hopeful of these things. Like I'm hopeful of these jobs that I've applied for, but they keep sending me these ads. I think I'm just gonna just leave it up to you, Lord. You can speak to one person there at Erie Insurance. If that's where I'm supposed to be, then you'll open that door. And if that door doesn't open this time around, then I'm gonna know that's not the place for me. It's that simple. And if that's not the place for me, Lord, and none of these North Carolina places, then that's the case. None of those places are for me, and that means I've got to do this business, which I think is probably going to be the case. The only reason I think of these other jobs is I think it would be easier for me to write this book if I had a job, and then I could just focus on writing the book and working the job and writing these other things. So the job would be actually an easier way to go right now. But Lord, I don't want that door to open with toxic people. I pray that you keep every door closed if that's what that looks like. I don't want to be in another situation like that again. So Lord, I'm just praying in advance. I don't want that. Please don't let that come my way, or shut it down quickly if it does. On the same breath, Lord, I ask you, if that door can't open, if there is an opportunity at Erie or one of these other places that I've applied, and the people are good and they need my help, and I can be a blessing, then I pray for that door to open, Lord. And if it's not a regular job, if it's just a contract piece, then let me find them and let me help them. And so, yeah, that's where things are today, Lord. So thank you for being with me. And I just love you, Lord, with all my heart. Thank you for that video today. That really helped me, because it helps me see that I'm not alone in this understanding. And that's really encouraging. So, okay, Lord, that's all for now. It's 7:30 almost, so it's time for me to go to bed soon. I love you, Lord, and yeah, that's all.